The Ghostbusters are back, and this time, the new opponent they're facing, Elsa from Frozen. Actually, it's not Elsa from Frozen, it's just a different character with ice powers, so it's not Elsa. Hey movie buffs, I'm Jack Benner, and welcome to my review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is the fifth film in the Ghostbusters franchise, as well as the sequel to 2021's Ghostbusters Afterlife. Gil Kenan is now directing this sequel after Jason Reitman directed Afterlife. And for the cast, you got the new cast of Afterlife, the old cast, and some new additions to the cast, such as Kumail Nanjiani. Set after the events of Afterlife, the Spengler family are in New York City as Ghostbusters. When an ancient artifact unleashes a new threat, it's up to the old and new Ghostbusters to save the world from a second ice age. Now, before we get into Frozen Empire, I would like to give you my thoughts on the Ghostbusters movies. Starting with the first Ghostbusters from 1984, still stands as one of my favorite comedies of all time. Pitch perfect cast, quotable lines, and impressive ghost effects for its time. Unfortunately, Ghostbusters 2 still remains as one of those comedy sequels that's inferior compared to the first movie. And in 2016, we got kind of a reboot with the 2016 Ghostbusters from Paul Feig. Now that is a divisive Ghostbusters movie. You either enjoy it, think it's okay, or just absolutely hate it. I'm on the side that hated it. I thought it was very unfunny, pointless, and it just didn't really justify its existence. Every time I think about that movie, I just thought, what was really the point in that movie? It just felt like a cash grab. And luckily in 2021, we got a new continuation of Ghostbusters with Afterlife. And this was a really good legacy sequel with new characters and old characters. Jason Reitman, son of the late Ivan Reitman, did a great job handling this film. And this, I think, is the second best Ghostbusters movie since the first. Strong cast, fun Stranger Things vibe, as well as having Finn Wolfhard in it. And I love the third act of this movie and how it paid tribute to the late Harold Ramis. I gave it 4 stars out of 5, a B+ when it came out, and I still stand by that grade. After the mid-credit scene of Afterlife, I was excited to see a sequel. However, I was disappointed that Jason Reitman wasn't returning to direct, and I was curious to see how Gil Kenan was going to handle Frozen Empire. And he's also the same director who directed Monster House, a 2006 motion capture animated film I really like and like to watch around Halloween. And when the first trailer came out, I was excited to see these characters again, to see how they would continue the story, as well as the new threat they're facing. I went into Ghostbusters Frozen Empire optimistic, hoping it would be a fun sequel. Despite the mixed reviews, I've been hearing some people enjoying it, or in the middle, or just didn't like it. And what are my thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire? Was it a worthy continuation of the Ghostbusters franchise? I left this movie pretty underwhelmed, and sadly, it is a step down and one of the weakest films in the Ghostbusters franchise. Let's start this review with the pros. First, the cast does a solid job with what they're given to do. If I were to choose 3 standouts, 2 new characters and 1 old character. First standout, McKenna Grace as Phoebe. I still really like her as this character. And without spoiling anything since it wasn't in the trailers, there is actually an idea for a potentially interesting character arc for her. And when I saw it, I was like, okay, that does sound interesting. Let's see what they do with it. And second, Paul Rudd. He is his usual charismatic, hilarious, and likable self. I feel like whenever Paul Rudd is in kind of a bad movie like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, he does at least try to elevate some humor and charm into any movie he's in. And come on, it's Paul Rudd. He's one of the most likable actors in Hollywood. And lastly, Dan Aykroyd. Out of the old cast, he was the one given the most to do here. And I did like his chemistry with Phoebe and Podcast here. And as for the old cast with Bill Murray, Ernie Hudson, and Annie Potts, they do have their funny moments here and there. And there are some enjoyable action scenes to watch in this movie that Gil Kenan did do a good job with, especially with this opening chase scene through New York City as the Spengler family are trying to trap this one ghost. That whole scene followed by a great opening scene was a lot of fun to watch. I was like, okay, I am ready for an entertaining sequel here. And the third act with the villain they're going up against is a lot of fun too. And the effects are still great. From unique ghost designs, from old characters like Slimer, as well as this one new ghost like Pukey. I enjoyed him. And I loved the opening scene in this film. And that is becoming one of my favorite opening scenes in any Ghostbusters movie. I just thought there was a lot of tension and build-up and potential with it that set the stage for a villain that was like, ooh, I'm really excited about this. Let's see what they do with it. And sadly, that's where my positives end. And now, let's get into the cons. First, By far, my biggest problem with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, this movie's story is overstuffed with too many characters. It just tries to throw in so many characters to focus on that it just feels kind of messy. It just feels like catching up for most of the movie, like, hear what these characters are doing, hear what these characters are doing, hear what these characters are doing. It just tries to focus on so many different groups of characters. You got the Spangler family from Afterlife, as well as those two other characters from Afterlife, like Podcast, and I think her name was Tracy. And you got the old cast returning, as well as new characters like Kumail Nanjiani and some other guy who was working on the lab with them. That it just feels like too much going on, that it just feels kind of messy with the story. There's just too many characters in this movie that it was kind of difficult to give everyone attention or more to do. Felt like you underused that character. Couldn't you have cut that character from the story or give this character more to do? And Finn Wolfhard and Carrie Coon, they're decent here, but they felt underused, barely given anything to do. Finn Wolfhard's character is basically, I'm 18 years old and shenanigans with Slimer, and that's basically his character here. And Bill Murray, he does have his funny lines here and there, but he doesn't really get a lot to do here. And even new actors to the cast, Patton Oswalt doesn't really get a lot to do. He just mostly has exposition dump scenes. And I felt like he could have just been played by anyone. Waste of him. You got Remy from Ratatouille there. And Kumail Nanjiani, who is a very funny actor, doesn't really get a lot of funny lines here. He does a decent job, but he just kind of feels like he's just going through the motions. And this guy was in The Big Sick. Just great movie, but they just didn't utilize him enough. It just felt a bit repetitive with how many characters it focuses on, that once it gets to the climax, it was like, okay, this is where things are starting to pick up. And honestly, this movie just kind of felt like a lifeless and standard sequel that didn't really have a lot of energy to it, which was pretty disappointing. And the jokes in this movie just felt hit and miss. There were a few times where I did chuckle or laugh a bit, but then there were other times where jokes just fell flat and just felt awkward and weren't really that funny. And a disappointing flaw was the villain. Now, like I said, I loved the opening scene in this film and was excited to see this villain in the trailers. He had an awesome look and powers. The opening scene set the stage for him. We got an awesome villain here. But as the film progresses and once we get to that climax, he just feels like just a generic cliched villain, and even with his dialogue felt cliched. You just had potential for possibly one of the best Ghostbusters villain, but they just kind of wasted that villain, which was really a shame. And lastly, there are some moments of fan service. There's like, remember this from Ghostbusters? Remember this from Ghostbusters? Yeah, it just kind of feels like just fan service or nostalgia just for the sake of it, which I didn't really feel like Afterlife did. I felt like Afterlife did fan service properly, but here it just didn't have that same effect. In conclusion, while it's not without its entertaining moments from the cast, action, and the effects are still great, sadly, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire ended up being a disappointing follow-up with an overstuffed story and an underwhelming villain. Since this movie has been receiving mixed reviews, I am curious to hear what you thought of this movie if you're a Ghostbusters fan or if you enjoyed Afterlife like I did. If you enjoyed this movie, awesome. I'm really happy to hear you enjoyed this movie, but I'm on the side that found it to be a mixed bag and I was hoping for something better. If you haven't seen this movie yet, I don't think you should rush out and see it. I would probably say just wait for streaming or rental. I don't think it's a must-see film. And now to grade it, I'm going to give Ghostbusters Frozen Empire 2.5 stars out of 5. A C+. Man, this and Kung Fu Panda 4 being my most disappointing films of 2024 so far, and I've given both of them the same grade. I'm just feeling underwhelmed with March right now, minus Dune Part 2 and Love Lies Bleeding, the latter of which I think is a film worth checking out. This March was just kind of a 50-50 month for movies, and I'm just waiting for something to pick things up. And I've just seen Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, and working on my review right now. Did that pick things up? Not entirely, but wasn't really what I was hoping for. However, Monkey Man comes out this Friday, which looks awesome, and I'm hearing great things about that, so maybe that can pick things up. As someone who had a blast with Ghostbusters Afterlife, I was pretty disappointed in this sequel and was hoping it would be just as entertaining, but sadly, it just ended up being a forgettable sequel. Now, this film is doing decent at the box office. I believe it made $40+ million on its opening weekend, so I believe it might catch up to its budget. So if they do proceed with a third Ghostbusters film with these characters, I'm hoping for better results. And if I were to rank this film in my Ghostbusters ranking, number 5 at the bottom, that's where I put the 2016 film, Trash. Number 4, that's where I'm going to put Frozen Empire. Number 3 would be Ghostbusters 2. Number 2, Ghostbusters Afterlife. And number 1, the first Ghostbusters. So that right there is my Ghostbusters ranking, and feel free to share your Ghostbusters ranking if you wish. So I'd like to hear from you guys. What do you guys think of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire? Have you seen it? Do you agree? Disagree with my review? Or if you haven't seen it, are you interested in seeing the film or not? Let me know down below. Did you enjoy hearing my thoughts on this movie and want to see more reviews like this in the future? If yes, please hit that like and subscribe button if you're new here, and don't forget that notification bell for my next upload in the future. It really means a lot. And until the next video, I'm Jack Benner, and look forward to another movie review.